All right, it's Mike Messier. We're going to go for a little wrestle ride with Mike. And the topic of discussion today is Wrestlemania matches that were a disgrace. Wrestlemania matches that were a disgrace. What does that mean? Well, first of all, the qualifier is pretty easy enough. Matches that were held at WrestleMania, which is the annual WWE / formerly WWF. Usually March of any given year. I believe the first WrestleMania was on a Sunday afternoon. I believe March 31st, I want to say 1985. It might have been March 27th, but I'm pretty sure it was the last day of March of 1985. They've had WrestleManias usually on Sunday nights now at 7. I think we're headed to the 34th or 35th WrestleMania coming up real soon in 2018. But one of the most interesting WrestleMania dates is a sidebar. Monday, April 6th, I believe, 1986. WrestleMania was on a Monday, and do you want to know why? I'll tell you why. Because that was the dark night for Hollywood. In the entertainment world, WrestleMania 2 had 25 celebrities, anyone from Ricky Schroeder to a lady who was doing commercials for the Wendy's restaurant franchise at the time. And for all those people in Hollywood, Monday is traditionally the dark night for theater. So that's the night that most of those celebrities would all have their availability, because there's not live shows on Monday nights traditionally in the Broadway and the Los Angeles theater world. So anyway, in Chicago. Let's get back to the point. Matches that were a disgrace. WrestleMania 1, I'm actually going to say there was no matches at WrestleMania 1 that were a disgrace. Some might say that Mr. T's involvement in the main event was unnecessary, or just too much celebrity ebb and flow or celebrity involvement. I would actually say no. I'd say that was the whole point of that initial WrestleMania. Mr. T was not at his exact peak. He was about a year out from his, Mr. T, A-Team fame. Clubber Lang from the Rocky 3 film came out in 83. That's actually where he and Hogan, I don't know if they even met on the set, because they technically, on a film set, Hogan and Mr. T wouldn't need to be on the set the same days, because they were in different scenes. But they were both in the film. That both gave both of those guys a huge exposure. Kind of interesting that Sylvester Stallone was not at WrestleMania 1, as far as I know. I don't think he was in the audience or anything. And if you think about it, I don't think Sylvester Stallone, from my memory, has even been in a WrestleMania. I'm trying to think if he inducted someone into the Hall of Fame or something, but I can't remember that either. So it's just kind of interesting that as much as Stallone, helped Hogan get on the map, which, of course, Hogan was with, Vince the first time in that 81 era. When he got the call, he went to, I guess Vince Sr. or Vince Jr. didn't want him to do, Rocky 3. He didn't want him to distract from wrestling, and they went to Vince, Verne Gagne, and so forth. Anyway, I don't know if Sylvester Stallone's ever really had any involvement with pro wrestling, or especially WWE. His mother, Jackie Stallone, was the kayfabe president of Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, the original, back in the 80s, not the Netflix thing. Moving forward, okay, so I'm going to say no. There was no disgraceful matches at WrestleMania 1. Could you make a case that the Bundy SD Jones was disgraceful? I wouldn't. I mean, I think the only disgraceful thing is they promoted that thing. They always said it was a 6-second match or a 9-second match, but it really wasn't. It was more like a 25 or 35 second match if you even time it by even their own bell. I don't know. I guess they were really pushing that Bundy squash this guy, but either the two guys just didn't have their coordination down, or Bundy just wanted to throw a few moves on him, or who knows. But that thing is a lie, but it wasn't a disgrace. He had some preliminary matches on that show. Tito Santana beating, really, probably the best shape you've ever seen him. Playboy Buddy Rose was actually in pretty good shape under the hood. I believe that's him as Mr. X. And for whatever reason, Playboy Buddy didn't, wrestle as himself. He wrestled as Mr. X. And actually, the black is thinning. So, congratulations to Buddy Rose. Matt Bourne, actually, once again, kind of put in that weird spot where he's a known territory guy. Matt Bourne would go on to be Doink at a few WrestleManias, notably 9 and 10, I believe, in a mixed tag with Bam Bam Bigelow, Luna Vachon, and his Dink friend. But here he was all the way back in WrestleMania 1, the man that would become Matt Bourne or Matt Osborne, more or less, a preliminary kind of role, but kind of over, going against Ricky Steamboat. If you were a hardcore Matt Bourne fan, I guess you could have some issues with that match, but I wouldn't. Alright, so we're deep into this video. WrestleMania 2. Disgraceful matches. I would say that you could make a case, and I will make a case, that the Mr. T boxing match was really unnecessary. You had this great talent in Roddy Piper. I believe the Nassau Coliseum was the main event, was the place for that match, the main event, that venue. Piper versus T in the boxing. Apparently, Piper claimed later that he had a lot of issues with Mr. T back and forth. They just didn't get along. There was some pretty unpleasant, just call it what it is, race baiting or on Piper's part, shaving Haiti Kid's head into a really haphazard mohawk with Bob Orton. Really kind of nasty. And Piper was great. I love Piper, but if you look at some of that footage, Piper sometimes can say things that were a little on the edge as far as, whatever you want to call it. And I know it's a different era, and I'm not condemning Piper. I'm just saying that the match, you really had to dig deep to get any interest into that thing, in my opinion, because they had kind of played that whole, Piper T thing a year before. And so it was just kind of one of those things where they didn't have much for Piper to do. They figured throw him back in there with Mr. T, get a rehash on the year before's grudge. And this time I'm trying to personalize it with this whole boxing thing. And I just don't think it worked. Now, that same token, you might say, well, gee whiz, Mike, if you do say gee whiz, do you think that the Battle Royal at WrestleMania 2 was also disgraceful? And I'd say, no. I'd say, no, I wouldn't say it was. And I'll make a defense of the WrestleMania 2 Battle Royal, basically because a wrestler won it, Andre the Giant. And I think that if it had been anyone else on the football side of things, if they had chosen, the thing that could have been, and people could have thought this at the time, that Refrigerator Perry might have won the Battle Royal because he was super popular as far as a pop culture guy, with the championship football team of the Chicago Bears. You can make a case that they could have had Refrigerator Perry win this thing, even deposing of Andre, or Andre and Stud, toppling over, and somehow Perry wins the thing. They didn't do that. I think all those people probably had a lot of respect for Andre, even the football guys. And so Andre won, and he eliminated a couple of wrestlers, Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart. Bret Hart tells a story that he thought he was going to get a singles match that night against Steamboat. That would have been nice, and that would have put basically Hercules, I guess, into the Battle Royal. But they, Bret, I'm not sure about that, because he was really a tag team guy at the time with the Hart Foundation. They hadn't even won the tag belts yet, so I think Bret might have, had one of those conversations that wrestlers tend to have that's not really with the person in charge, and then they just take it for, they think that's going to happen or that should happen. But in any event, I think it worked out fine. The Steamboat victory over Hercules was kind of just his showcase match. Once again, back then, or I'll say this for the first time as I'm joking, back then, wrestlers had to build themselves up over a course of years. You didn't just come in and automatically get title matches and title opportunities, which is the whole thing about Hulk Hogan, because he came into the WWF, after a sabbatical of a few years in the AWA, and within 2.5, 3 weeks, he's got the world title. That was very shocking, because in that era, guys just didn't storm into a company and start winning championships. You literally, if you look at Steamboat, WrestleMania 1, he's beating Matt Bourne. WrestleMania 2, he's beating Hercules, kind of in a mid-card match. And WrestleMania 3, he's finally getting the Intercontinental title. Ultimate Warrior comes in. And I think, he made some rumblings and so forth, but he was there for a while before he even got the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam 88. and he wasn't world champion until WrestleMania April of 90. So I think people have a different, time is a different thing now. There's more content, as they call it, which I hate that term. But blah, blah, blah. What else? WrestleMania 3, the midgets thing. I'd say you could say it was disgraceful. What's that? It's King Kong Bundy, I believe Lord Littlebrook and Little Tokyo against Hillbilly Jim. I want to say the Haiti Kid, once again. Kind of a holdover from WrestleMania 2. And there was another guy, Sky Lolo, on Hillbilly Jim's team. And the big move was Bundy slamming Sky Lolo. And just the audacity of that man. Just to body slam a little fellow. Or a midget, whatever the proper term is. And Sky Lolo, I mean, he probably looked like he was 50 or 60 by that point. Probably shouldn't be taking a body slam from Bundy. It was one of those guilty pleasures, honestly. And look, let's be honest with each other. To body slam a midget is not something normal people would do or want to do. But in the context of a wrestling match where that's exactly what you're not supposed to do, is for the big guys to touch the little guys, then that's the audacity of Bundy, which in a weird way, it kind of salvaged Bundy for a few more months. He was gone from the company less than a year later. But because Bundy had been downgraded from main event of WrestleMania 2 to this ridiculous 6-person, midget, normal guy size match, whatever you want to call it, it kind of gave him a little bit of a validation, like, okay, he's still a badass. He's not taking to this well. The rest, okay, look, I want to go somewhere dark here, folks. George the Animal Steel, to me, tainted the fucking Ricky Steamboat victory over Randy Savage. And you might argue that. You might say, oh, gee whiz. If you do say gee whiz a lot. That's not the case. It was fine. It was within the storyline. But you got to remember, George Steele at the time was doing things like mine. Like, I think he had a toy gorilla or something that he used to hang out with, George the Animal Steel. And I think that, George Steele, in my opinion, no offense, really did kind of taint that Steamboat Savage match, the ending. And people might say that's fucking an asshole thing to say, but if you take a look at the Crockett Cup 87 Barry Windham versus Ric Flair, you don't see George the Animal Steel with his green tongue, okay, floating around, pushing Flair off the top turnbuckle, because they didn't need that for a main event match at Crockett Cup 87, all right? Watch my Crockett Cup Memories tape if you need a refresher, folks. What's next? WrestleMania 3, the rest of the show. No, I don't think anything else was wrong. Unless I'm forgetting. I mean, they had Alice Cooper come in, so forth and so on. WrestleMania 4, I almost skipped it. Valentine beating Steamboat comes to mind. I don't know if that's a disgrace. I think it was one of those deals where they really didn't want to confuse the audience that they thought were simpletons, and having Randy Savage beat a good guy, meaning Steamboat, in the second round. So they wanted to preserve that integrity of really pushing Savage as the mainstream good guy, so to speak. And it wouldn't make sense in that regard for him to go over Steamboat. That being said, yeah, it would have been nice to have a Steamboat Savage match. That would have been a little tip of the hat to the intelligent fan. That tournament was such a... If you compare the WrestleMania 4 tournament to the WWF Classic tournament, 2.5 years earlier, which Savage was also in that. He got to the finals against the Junkyard Dog. You can see that they took a lot less chances in the WWF title tournament in '88. If you really look at that Classic tournament, which was their first ever pay-per-view, it was a great tight tournament, and you had matches like Double Face, Steamboat, Davey Boy Smith. You had, Terry Funk versus Moondog Spot. You had Paul Orndorff versus Tito Santana in that tournament. If you had just mixed that up a little bit in the tournament for the title, it wouldn't have been seen as such a dud. The other thing is, they had a Jake the Snake versus Rick Rude match at that WrestleMania 4 tournament. But guess what, folks? The problem was, in my opinion, the problem was in that match that their program hadn't started to air yet. that their program of Rude hitting on Jake the Snake's woman, a wife at the time, Cheryl Roberts, very demure lady, sexy lady, that didn't air until after the WrestleMania 4 tournament pay-per-view. So my point is, they kind of fucked it up, because I think they might have taped that angle before WrestleMania 4, then they had the WrestleMania 4 15-minute match, and then they broadcast that angle afterwards. If that's what happened, because it just was very disjointed. That match was a lot of chin locks, and the Jake the Snake working man's punch, as Steve Austin would say, but it wasn't a good match. I'm trying to think of the WrestleMania 4 Battle Royal. I mean, they probably had a lot of celebrity filler on that. And at the time, you're putting that against Clash of the Champions 1, which was 2.5 hours of a really tight show with the Fantastics and the Midnight Express using tables at ringside, and Sting and the Penthouse Pet being a judge. So, anyway, I don't think I'd say any one particular match was disgraceful. The Hogan-Andre was not great, but it wasn't disgraceful. WrestleMania 5, Bobby Heenan and Terry Taylor, I think you can make a case, and I will make a case. It was disgraceful because, they have a lot of revisionist history about how it wasn't a rib on Terry Taylor. And look, I like Bruce Pritchard's broadcast as much as the next guy. But for him to always say it wasn't a rib, Vince just saw Terry Taylor as, hey, I'm the rooster. I'm the cock of the walk. It was Terry's fault. He didn't accept it. To me, as a real fan of that era, okay, don't tell me that. Don't lie. Just, if you're going to rib someone or if you're going to disgrace Terry Taylor, then, don't lie about it. Just, we didn't like him. We wanted to give him a shitty gimmick. We wanted to ruin his career, so we did. And he took the money because he needed it. So just be honest about it. I hate that whole revisionist wrestler or promoter history where they try to shim-sham you on something that happened 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. Well, we all know they just humiliated and disgraced him. So that's that. The next thing on WrestleMania 5 card, they had a whole thing with Run DMC, I think, was there. A lot of filler stuff. The Morton Downey, Bruce Pritchard, as Bruce Love, I actually like that segment. As sad as you might say it is, my cable feed watching WrestleMania 5 had really fucked up audio, folks. So I don't know if you experienced that, but I remember watching WrestleMania 5 and the whole time there was this squirrely audio thing going on. But in any event, it was fine. The main event, Savage Hogan, was good. Warrior and look at this water, by the way. That's the ocean. All right, moving forward. What other big things happened? 6, Dusty, Savage. No, the mixed tag. I can't think of any. I might be forgetting something. We'll just move forward. So WrestleMania 7, Power and Glory losing in a minute. That was a big thing that I didn't like as a Power and Glory fan. I also like the Road Warriors, or the Legion of Doom, but I didn't like that match because it was only a minute long. Found out later that both Power and Glory had injuries and were doing the best they could. And Roman even took that vicious clothesline thing or maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but he had an injury going in there. The rest of the show I thought was pretty good. WrestleMania 8, you have that big clusterfuck of an 8-man match. They just threw Slaughter and the Beverly Brothers and the Bushwhackers in there. I don't know. I mean, the Sid Hogan, I wouldn't call it disgrace, just a botched ending. Piper Brett was the highlight of that. 9 was a pretty bad show. I mean, it was fun to watch because of the setting, I thought, but just the matches weren't great. The Yoko Hogan, I don't think anything was a disgrace. It just wasn't very good, So I'm trying to clarify. 10, I can't think of anything was a disgrace. I mean, you could say that those guys that didn't get their match, the 10-man, because the ladder match went long. 11, okay, here we go. Now we're getting to just some disgraceful things. Lawrence Taylor, that would be a bit of a disgrace, okay? LT winning a match over Bam Bam Bigelow. I know why they did it. It had been a while since they had celebrity involvement, and they wanted to take advantage of celebrity involvement in a WrestleMania again. They also put that on last. They also basically put the whole NFL or whatever NFL odds and ends they could find, whoever it was. Steve Mongo McMichael was even there, I think. at ringside. So it was just another example of WWF putting over another entity, in this case the NFL, over themselves, which never makes sense to me, but Vince always does that shit. 12, Hunter jobbing to Warrior. I mean, it was just a match at the time. Now it stands out, but at the time it wasn't a big deal. The 13, I'll just go cut to the jugular because I'm running out of time. I'm sure we're running out of patience. I might do another one of these where I have things more organized. I just want to do a very instinctual thing. What were the matches that really upset me about WrestleMania? Santino Marella winning a Divas Battle Royal in one of those, early PG era fucking women's battle royals, Divas Battle Royals. Really disgraceful that even at that time they were trying to push over women as, oh, these are great women athletes of tomorrow, or we love our women wrestlers, but they humiliated them by having them all lose to Santana in a women's battle royal, which was disgraceful. So, I mean, for those that get all excited about women's wrestling in WWE now, we're only talking 7 or 8 years ago where they had a woman, a man in drag win a women's battle royal at WrestleMania and humiliate them all. And I think the Bellas were even done that. Vince versus Brett. I don't think it was the same WrestleMania, but it was within 2 or 3 years. That was a disgrace. And I'll say why. I'll be hardcore about it. Look, the subtext of that match was the death of Owen Hart, okay? And we can try to bullshit around it and say, no, it was just Montreal screwjob. Fuck you. The subtext was that there was anger from the Hart family about Owen dying. And Brett, could claim that they're all there because of the Montreal screwjob, but 10 or 12 Harts at ringside. The subtext, if you want to fucking admit to it or not, is that they were upset and looking for revenge because Owen was killed. And to use that as a storyline, and for none of the Harts to actually pop Vince in the face, whether he wanted it or accepted it or knew it was coming or not, it was just a weird kind of thing where you had to watch to see the train wreck, and then the train doesn't wreck, and they're like, oh, what did you want to see, a train wreck? Yeah, we did. That's why you baited us into that. So that was disgraceful in all ends. Should have never happened. What else? The Piper Goldust match was those guys pulled it off. They're going back to 12. I just jumped in time. But if you really looked at that match, you'd say that was hard hitting, but it also had, elements. You couldn't do that now. Elements of homophobia, elements of OJ, just weird. But it was, to those guys' credit, they pulled it off. This asshole's looking at me. What else? I don't know. I mean, there was something I was really worked up about, but I kind of forgot about it. I might have to do another one of these WrestleMania matches that were disgrace videos. But I really want to say that Brett Vince kind of rubs me the wrong way. Let's see what else. Was there something else? Fandango going over Jericho. I can see why Jericho's left the WWE. Because as much as he's contributed, as much as he says they love him and they're all friends and all that crap, every once in a while they fuck with Jericho. And having him lose to Fandango, and then Fandango just becomes a jobber, more or less, with a song and a girl, kind of an insult or disgrace. There was a really big one that I was thinking about. They had something with Brodus Clay dancing around that was kind of stupid a couple of years ago. That wasn't that long ago. The Miz Cena main event from like 9 years ago, which was Miz's probably one and only WrestleMania main event, through no fault of his own, was a bit of a disgrace. Why would they have Miz in the main event if the whole focus was on Cena and Rock? Because it's Cena and Rock. They're just arrogant. Having those guys kind of hog up the main event for 3 years in a row. Yeah, look, I'm not the biggest CM Punk fan, but I'm not against CM Punk. CM Punk would have a reason to be pissed because honestly, people were more into CM Punk at the time. And if they had put him and say an Edge or an Undertaker or a Jericho or even a Triple H or somebody in a main event, Punk makes the point that at WrestleMania, for the most part, the main event closes the show. And we can debate. That's another debate. But anyway, I'd say that was a disgrace. Some guy walking his dog. Boy, that's original. And what else? I think we're kind of running out of time. I didn't really go into this video with well-prepared notes or anything, but I'd say that, in my mind, the biggest disgraceful matches at WrestleManias, I'll go out on a limb and I'll, say Santana Ina winning the women's match was probably the biggest disgrace. I'd say that the Vince Brett was distasteful as maybe that's a bigger demand, but it's really flip a coin, because as a fan you feel guilty you got suckered into that. The Randy Orton Triple H match that went after Shawn and Undertaker was a bit of a kind of a disgrace because they had put a lot of time into their storyline, but it just wasn't that good of a match. So that's Mike Messier. I'm going to get better organized details and do this list again. But thanks for watching, and then keep watching. I got a lot of wrestling rants, life rants, short films, Messier mantras. Mike Messier saying, this year WrestleMania